Good morning. I want you to imagine that you wake up one morning and you walk out the front door and you see this lamp in the bushes. Looks kind of strange, so you go and you grab it and you start to rub the dirt off, and all of a sudden, a genie pops out. And it gives you 3 wishes. I don't know why you guys are laughing. That could be real. So the first thing you do, right, Genie gives you 3 wishes, you wish for more wishes, and guess what? It works. So you can just have whatever you want in this world. And that sounds awesome beyond measure, because we tend to have this belief that if we could just have the right combination of things, that life would finally feel complete. That's how most people live their life. They are constantly chasing after that next thing. And they think that once they get there, they will finally have lasting satisfaction. But it never works. Sure, it's great for a moment, but that always fades. And then we just change the goal and move on to the next thing. You know, think about your car. My guess is that when you first bought it, you loved it. You picked it for a reason, but now it's just your car. It's just transportation. That excitement has worn off. And that leads lots of people to just keep buying new cars. Or maybe for you it's shoes or cell phones or vacations or whatever. See, no one goes out and buys new clothes because their old ones are worn out. Right? Your closet is just full of stuff that you loved when you bought it. But now it's not special at all. So you go out, you get something else you don't need. And you think that the next new thing is somehow going to be different than all the things before it. But if you had that lamp, you could have it all. You could have a brand new car every day. You could have Bentleys or Ferraris or whatever. Maybe it's classic Mustangs or a limousine. Absolutely no limits. You could live in any house in the world. You could take any vacation. You could experience anything. And that sounds awesome, right? Even though I keep telling you the solution isn't in those things that you're looking for. You know, last week, we looked at the reality that you can spend your entire life running hard only to find out that it was in the wrong direction. That all of your energy and striving was wasted because you never achieved the satisfaction that was driving you. But what if you didn't just have to run in one direction? What if you could chase everything all at once? Because that's what the lamp would allow. If you had complete, unlimited resources, unlimited opportunity, so that you could have anything and everything that the world offers. In other words, can abundance remove that emptiness? Would having it all actually satisfy your soul? And that's the question that we see answered in today's text. Because Solomon was the guy who was uniquely equipped to try this out. He had all the power, all the resources, all the authority to have absolutely everything, and that's exactly what he did. His life became just one big experiment where he got to have it all, and then he tells us what he found out at the end of that. And this isn't just theory here. This isn't a man looking from the outside in and guessing, because I can tell you that a Lamborghini isn't going to satisfy you, and you'll say, dude, you drive a 17-year-old Jeep Compass that makes funny noises. How would you know if a Lamborghini would satisfy me? But Solomon lived it. He had it all. And he walked the path that each of us is tempted to walk every day. And so the first thing that he does is he chases after pleasure. So starting in verse 1, it says, I said in my heart, come now, I will test you with pleasure. Enjoy yourself. Now, we all like pleasure, and we get wanting more of it. So Solomon just completely removes all the limits and just dives headfirst into hedonism, which means that if it sounds good or feels good or tastes good, then he was going to have it. And this is where we need to remind ourselves of the scale of what Solomon did. Because we hear pleasure, we might think, okay, a good meal or a nice vacation, night out on the town, something like that. But that isn't what he was doing here. He wasn't sampling pleasure, he was all in. And to just kind of grasp that, we can look at 1 Kings, and it gives us a snapshot of what his daily life required. It said Solomon's provision for one day was 30 cores of meal. A core was about 220 liters, which is like one of the great big outdoor trash cans. So he had 90 of those trash cans filled with grain every day. And then 10 fat oxen and 20 pasture-fed cattle and hundreds of sheep besides deer and gazelles and roebucks and fat and fowl. And that isn't for some special event. That was just Tuesday. And what you should see is that every meal that he took was a celebration. Every day was a massive party. And it wasn't just eating and drinking. In verse 8, he says, I got singers, both men and women, and many concubines, the delight of the sons of man. So he ate and he partied like no one in history. And he was entertained. And of course, they didn't have TVs or cell phones or radios, the things we use to entertain us today. So he had the best live entertainment that existed in the world. And he had lots of sex. Right? It says there were many concubines there. And a concubine was a woman who didn't have the rights of a wife, but did all the other stuff. And if you look at 1 Kings 11:3, it says he had 700 wives who were princesses and 300 concubines. So anything the human heart imagines in terms of sexual fulfillment, Solomon lived it. And I hope you can see the pattern here. See, one of the most common pursuits of people when they are young is just to go after pleasure. They think that's what will satisfy them and make them happy. They think that's what they're missing. And Solomon did it bigger than anyone else. And guess what? It didn't work. And of course, that's not a surprise, because that's what we see as well. People party and they go, they have a good time, but eventually they realize it's time to grow up and settle down. So Solomon did the same thing. He decided he was going to make something of himself. In verses 4-6, he said, I made great works. I built houses and planted vineyards for myself. I made myself gardens and parks and planted in them all kinds of fruit trees. I made myself pools from which to water the forest of growing trees. So he didn't have like some backyard project. He built an empire. One of the most spectacular buildings in the ancient world was Solomon's temple. It took 7 years of nonstop labor to build it. But guess how long he spent building his own house? 13 years. He did everything on a ridiculous scale. So you might plant a garden. He planted a forest, literally a whole forest. So he had all kinds of achievements. And then he went after possessions. Experiences didn't work, so maybe accumulating stuff will. So at a practical level, so many people think this is what they're missing. They want the car or the boat or the house, and they buy toys and clothes, shoes, whatever it is, and they just keep piling it up, thinking that the next thing will finally tip the scales. So here comes Solomon, and he just goes crazy with it, like everything else. Ecclesiastes says he got slaves and livestock and gold and treasure, but that doesn't even scratch the surface. Look at 1 Kings 10. It talks about how much money he had. It said, now the weight of gold that came to Solomon in 1 year was 666 talents of gold. Besides that which came from the explorers and from the business of the merchant and from all the kings of the west and from the governors of the land. Let me do some math for you. That's about 50,000 pounds of gold a year. And that wasn't all the gold, right? And that comes to just over $4 billion in today's prices. And it's not like that's all he got. He said, hey, that's just a regular portion of gold. Doesn't include all the other stuff. And look what it says in verse 21. It says, all of King Solomon's drinking vessels were of gold, and all the vessels of the house of the forest of Lebanon were of pure gold. None were of silver. Silver was not considered as anything in the days of Solomon. There was so much abundance and wealth that silver had no value. And I think it's at like $70 an ounce right now, just for perspective. He was rich beyond any type of measure. Right? The guy just had everything. The Bible says that his throne was made out of ivory, which is one of the most valuable items in the ancient world. And then he took that ivory and he covered it with gold. You think about how crazy that is. You have it made out of one of the most valuable materials in existence, and then you just cover it up with gold. Just that level of opulence. It'd be like stuffing a beanbag with designer clothing, right? It's just ridiculous. He had it all. He had whole cities of horsemen and chariots to serve him. And the Bible records that he had almost 250,000 men working on projects at any given time. And 2 Chronicles 9 says, King Solomon surpassed all the kings of the world in riches and wisdom. And the point here is that he went after every kind of enjoyment that you can have. No matter what you have done, what you have seen, what you have tried, he did it bigger and better. He chased after pleasure, he chased after accomplishments, and then he chased after stuff. He tried all three of them, and look what he concluded in verse 10. He says, "And whatever my eyes desired, I did not keep from them. I kept my heart from no pleasure, for my heart found pleasure in all my toil, and this was the reward for my toil." So make sure you see this part. It says that his heart found pleasure in it. He chased after it, and he enjoyed it. You know, for some reason, churches and Christians pretend that sin isn't pleasurable. And it's ridiculous. I think it's just dishonest to talk that way. Because sin feels good for a moment. That's why we do it. It gives you a taste of satisfaction, but it will never give you the whole meal. You will always be left wanting and hungry in the end. And Scripture, it bears that out. Hebrews 11 says, it talks about Moses and says, by faith, Moses, when he was grown up, refused to be called the son of Pharaoh's daughter, choosing rather to be mistreated with the people of God than to enjoy the fleeting pleasures of sin. So I hope you see that. It's like having your favorite meal or dessert, and it just tastes so amazingly good that you don't want to stop eating, even when you're full, so you overindulge. Every single bite of that meal tasted great, but you're left feeling bloated and miserable at the end. And that's what sin is like. The pleasure is real, but it is fleeting. It is temporary, and it will always leave you empty and more broken than when you began. And that's what Solomon is saying here. He's saying, yeah, it was nice. I enjoyed it for a moment, but it didn't last. It didn't satisfy. And he lays out his final verdict in verse 11. He says, "Then I considered all that my hands had done, and the toil I had expended in doing it, and behold, all was vanity and striving after the wind, and there was nothing to be gained under the sun." So there it is. He has it all. He enjoyed it, and it was worthless. See, we see this kind of thing play itself out over and over again. You see it with billionaires who work 100-hour weeks, sleep in the office, even though there's literally nothing in the world they can't buy. We see it with celebrities and sports stars who achieve the pinnacle of success and then kill themselves. Guys like Robin Williams or Junior Seau or Anthony Bourdain more recently. And on and on and on. There's so many of them. Don't fall into this trap of thinking that whatever you're chasing after is going to work for you. It didn't work for Solomon. It doesn't work for anyone else, and you're not going to be the exception. So what does Solomon do next? Pleasure didn't work, accomplishments didn't work, and possessions didn't work. So maybe the answer is wisdom. Maybe the problem isn't what I have, maybe it's how I think. So that's what he did next. In verse 12, he says, "So I turned to consider wisdom and madness and folly. For what can the man do who comes after the king? Only what has already been done." In other words, Solomon's saying, I'm going to figure this out. I'm going to figure out how to think in such a way that my life feels complete. Now, do we do that today? Yeah, we sure do. And we don't phrase it like Solomon did, but our world is filled with people who are trying to change how they think. And they think that once they achieve that, it's all going to click. And it shows up in self-help books or podcasts. It shows up in mindfulness techniques that are so common today. And more we see it as people turn to therapy as a solution to all their problems. And don't mishear me on this. I'm not saying those are bad things. What I'm saying is they aren't the solution to your ultimate problem. We already talked about how Solomon was the wisest guy who ever lived. God granted that to him explicitly. So if there was anybody who could figure it all out, it's him. And in verse 13 he says, "Then I saw that there is more gain in wisdom than in folly, as there is more gain in light than in darkness." So once again, it's good stuff. Wisdom is good. You can improve your habits. You can change your mindset. And that is a good thing to do, but it won't get you where you're trying to go. Because he continues in verse 15, he says, "Then I said in my heart, what happens to the fool will happen to me also. Why then have I been so very wise? And I said in my heart that this also is vanity. For of the wise as of the fool there is no enduring remembrance, seeing that in all the days to come all will have been long forgotten. How the wise dies just like the fool." See, you can become more organized. You can start going to the gym and make great choices, but your destiny is the same either way. We are all marching towards death. And the older you get, the more you feel it. So wisdom didn't work either. So where does Solomon turn next? He went to work itself. Maybe the meaning is found in the grind. Maybe it isn't about what I accomplish or what kind of legacy I leave behind. And once again, these are all things we do today. People are obsessed with being remembered. But listen, that isn't going to happen. Is there anyone here, by a show of hands, anyone here that can name a great-great-grandparent? Not one. I thought there'd be a couple. We got a couple. Okay, yeah. But that proves my point. Just a couple of people. That isn't that long ago. See, even within just a few generations, you will be forgotten. No one is going to go and visit your tombstone. No one is going to be talking about what you did or what you provided. And Solomon, he built up this massive legacy, but he realized that he couldn't control what was going to happen next. So you can build something amazing, and your kids can go and just waste it all. And listen, I don't want to spoil the story for you, but that's exactly what happens. Solomon dies, and his kids begin fighting, and the whole nation of Israel gets torn in two, and it heads downhill real fast. So Solomon went after it all. He sought fulfillment in stuff and in pleasure and in wisdom and in building a legacy. And so what did he learn from that great experiment? In verse 224 it says, "There is nothing better for a person than that he should eat and drink and find enjoyment in his toil. This also I saw is from the hand of God. For apart from him, who can eat or who can have enjoyment?" So Solomon spent this whole chapter just tearing everything down and exposing the futility and placing your hope in temporary things. But he doesn't just leave you there. The wisest man in history has spent a lifetime figuring out what matters, and his answer is kind of surprising. He says you should enjoy your life. It's right there. He says eat and drink and find enjoyment. This is really important for us to grasp. The call to follow God is not a call to be miserable. It isn't a call to sit in a stiff chair and avoid anything enjoyable. That isn't biblical at all. It's not biblical Christianity. But here's where we have to be careful, because if we stop there, we miss the point. Solomon says, enjoy life, and then he immediately says, without God, we can't have any enjoyment at all. And what he's trying to get us to understand is that there is joy, that it isn't found in moments of pleasure. He's talking about a real, lasting joy. And he's clearly saying that there is no true enjoyment if God isn't involved. And don't misunderstand, this isn't suggesting that unbelievers can't have fun. Of course they can. They can laugh and experience pleasure. They can go on awesome vacations. They can have great meals. But the joy they experience is a pale shadow of what's available. It's real, but it's incomplete. So let me give you an example of what I mean there. Let's say two people go to Windjammers, and they order the exact same thing, a beautiful lobster dinner. Now, this isn't actually from Windjammers, because I thought we should go there and get a real picture and call it sermon research, but we couldn't pull it off, right? So they go to Windjammers, they both eat the lobster, they both enjoy it, but for one guy, that's the end. He tasted it, he enjoyed it, now it's done. But for the believer, that enjoyment doesn't terminate on itself. It rises and turns into gratitude and worship and awe. Because you don't just taste the lobster, you recognize that it's a gift from God. Lobster tastes like that because God designed it that way. God could have made food just purely functional. He could have made it all taste the same, probably like Brussels sprouts, but he didn't. He built pleasure into his creation on purpose. He wired your taste buds, and he created the richness and the savoriness, and he did it for the sake of the glory of his name. You see, every good thing points beyond itself and back to its creator. So yeah, we can all eat lobster and enjoy the lobster, but the believer gets to enjoy both the gift and the giver of that gift. And that changes everything. Because now the experience doesn't end when the plate is empty. It echoes up into praise and worship. And the meal becomes a moment of communion with your Savior. And you realize that every good thing you experience is a glimpse of God. See, that's the difference. It's the same lobster, same table, but an entirely different experience. And that's Solomon's point. It's not that the things of this world are bad. It's that the things of this world are a terrible destination. They were never meant to satisfy you. They were meant to lead you somewhere greater. That's why people are never satisfied. It doesn't matter how much good stuff they pile on their life, they still feel empty. Because they're asking creation to do what only the Creator can do. And so Solomon says, hey, enjoy your life. But then he shares where that enjoyment comes from. And look what he says. He says, for apart from him, who can eat or who can have enjoyment? In other words, you don't need better circumstances. You need a different source. Because the issue isn't that you haven't found the right thing or the right combination of things. The issue is that you're trying to find fulfillment apart from God. And Solomon is saying that leads to a dead end every single time. And all of this leads to a big question, which is, well, how does that work? Because some of you are out there thinking, man, I've never had a meal that led to worship. How do I become the type of person that doesn't just experience fleeting pleasure, but real, lasting, deep joy in the ordinary flow of life? And Solomon, he answers that in verse 26. He says, for to the one who pleases him, God has given wisdom and knowledge and joy. But to the sinner, he has given the business of gathering and collecting only to give to one who pleases God. This also is vanity and a striving after the wind. So there you go. That's the secret. God gives joy to those who please him. And we have to pause here a bit because lots of people hear that and say, okay, if I just behave well enough, if I put enough in the offering plate, if I do enough good things, God is going to reward me with joy. But that isn't what the Bible teaches. That's a prosperity gospel, and it is functionally false. So what does actually please God? Hebrews 11:6 tells us, it says, without faith, it is impossible to please him. See, you don't please God by cleaning up your life. You please him by trusting him, by turning from your sin and placing your faith in Christ. Because this isn't about recognizing that you aren't enough. It's about recognizing that he is. Because here's the reality. Everything Solomon tried to do and to find under the sun, Jesus offers from above. You want satisfaction? Jesus says, I am the bread of life. You want fulfillment? Jesus says, whoever drinks of the water that I give him will never thirst. You want purpose? Jesus says, follow me. See, when you trust Christ, when you truly submit to him, you are brought back into relationship with God. And that allows you to enjoy things as they were meant to be enjoyed. Not as ultimate things, but as good gifts. And so your life looks different. You still eat lobster, if you're lucky, right? You still go on vacation. You still laugh and you build and you work and you enjoy life. But none of those things are carrying the weight of your soul. They aren't the source of your joy. God is. And all of a sudden, your joy isn't fragile. It no longer depends on your circumstances at all because it flows from your relationship with God. And Solomon contrasts that with, he says, to the sinner, he is given the business of gathering and collecting. This is also vanity and striving after the wind. See, that's the person that's still chasing the genie lamp. Always chasing something, but never arriving. It's just a treadmill. They run and they run and they run, but they never get anywhere. That's the life that most people are living. And if that's you, if you're chasing pleasure or accomplishments or wisdom or whatever, you will end up exactly where Solomon says, empty. But if you build your life on God, if you seek him and chase him, everything changes. And so the question this morning is simple. What are you chasing after? Are you still trying to figure out what's going to satisfy you? Are you still running after that next thing? Or are you ready to come to the conclusion that Solomon reached? His message is clear. You can have it all and still have nothing. Or you can have God and finally have everything that matters. The choice is yours. So please stand for our closing hymn. It's number 481 in the hymnal. It's Come Just As You Are.